In 2019, the BBC published a trashy story about one of mainland China's largest landfills. The Jiangtengou in the city of Xi'an, the story goes, had run out of capacity some 25 years ahead of schedule. That year, China had about 400 incineration and waste-to-energy plants. About 50% of the country's municipal solid waste was processed by incineration. 6 years later, the Chinese situation is a lot more interesting. In 2025, China had over 1,137 incineration plants, and over 80% of Chinese municipal solid waste is incinerated. The country has about 1.2 million tons of daily incineration capacity, but just 700,000 tons of daily waste collection capacity. Thus, mothballed capacity plus counties digging up old landfills. Human history has never seen a more furious span of incinerator building. How did China build 700 incinerator plants in 6 years? In today's video, a look at China's 2020s incinerator boom. We burn our municipal solid waste for several reasons. A major one is that we want to reduce the volume of the waste. Incineration leaves behind a pile of ashes that is about 25 to 30% of its former size, saving a significant bit of landfill space. For Asia's megacities, which have limited space, this is huge. A perfect example is what's happening in Seoul. At the start of 2026, local governments were banned from putting solid waste directly into landfills without incineration because of dwindling space in landfills. Burning the waste also helps keep the landfill stable and somewhat clean. It removes smells that can make landfills unpleasant places to be around, and it burns down organic trash that can lead to potentially explosive waste gas or shifting land, causing disasters. The most infamous being the December 2015 incident in Shenzhen, when landfilled construction waste slid down as an avalanche, killing at least 73 people. One can argue certain environmental benefits. Landfills generate amounts of methane, and carbon dioxide as things decay. So while burning the trash does contribute some amount of greenhouse gases, it can prevent some too. And finally, we can use this waste as a renewable energy source, waste to energy. Waste to energy systems work like any other thermal power station. It burns waste to make steam that turns a turbine. There are several categories. The most common is the moving grate. Here, the waste fuel is put onto a downward sloping moving grate, kind of like an escalator, that slowly transports and mixes the material as it passes through the processing and incineration steps. First, there is a drying step. The waste material is dried with hot air passing above and fire coming up from below through the grate. We want to remove water content as that can dampen heating. There may or may not be a shredding step. One of the strengths of the moving grate is that it doesn't necessarily need pre-shredding. Then the waste hits the combustion chamber, where it sits for at least 2 seconds at temperatures of 850 to 1100 degrees Celsius. If the items are potentially hazardous, like plastics that contain chlorine, then we opt for the higher temperatures. The remaining ash drops down through a chute at the end. Energy leaves the furnace as flue gas and boils water inside a boiler. Steam then goes to a turbine before returning to liquid form. The flue gas goes on for post-processing. I, for some reason, was reminded of the Toy Story 3 incinerator, so I went and checked. But unfortunately, that one seems to be a simple open pit, apparently for story reasons. A real moving grate, I suppose, would not have been as dramatic, but now I am concerned for Andy's neighborhood. This plant is probably very heavily polluting. The moving grate is the most common waste-to-energy plant, but there are others. The circulating fluidized bed is an alternative that feeds waste into a chamber of hot fluidized sand. It tends to be more efficient. Speaking of, waste-to-energy plants are generally less efficient than today's advanced fossil fuel-fired thermal plants, and about 30% or lower compared to 40-ish%. This is because the steam does not get as hot, about 400 degrees compared to 600 degrees Celsius, and that is because waste-derived flue gases are quite corrosive due to the presence of chlorine in plastics. The Chinese government turned to incineration and waste-to-energy not to make more power, but for a practical reason. During the economic boom days, the country was generating more trash than it can bury into its landfills. In 1981, China collected about 26 million tons of municipal solid waste. To put that into context, the United States that year generated 6 times as much municipal solid waste despite at that time having only a quarter as many people. Those two numbers are not exactly one-to-one. Collected is not the same as generated, but you get the point. Before the opening up, people didn't make that much waste. They were poor. And the solid waste that those people produce was mostly organic, kitchen food waste, whatnot. This is characteristic of developing countries and non-urban populations. But China's rapid development and urbanization changed both the amount of waste and its composition. The amount grew at 8 to 10% annually. No country has ever experienced such rapid waste growth. In 2004, mainland China surpassed the United States as the world's largest generator of municipal solid waste. By 2014, the amount of solid waste reached 178 million tons, nearly 7 times higher than what it was in 1981. The waste composition also changed. There's still a lot of organic material, but also more plastic, paper, and metal. Containers, bottles, whatever. Some recycling is done by informal workers, but low material prices makes that relatively unprofitable. Projections made by the World Bank in 2018 predicted that, by 2030, China will be generating twice as much trash as the United States. Where are they going to put all that? Traditionally, the dumping ground for all this trash has been the landfill. Early ones used cement liners, but trash stored there tended to leak toxic chemicals into the groundwater. More modern landfills, equipped with high-density polyethylene liners, did not emerge until the 1990s. The city government struggled to bring enough official landfills online. You don't just cordon off an area and start dumping trash. Done right, a landfill is a multi-year project. You must survey environmental and groundwater risks, then build access roads and install liners to prevent leachate flow, waste gas amelioration infrastructure, and monitoring equipment. Since the official landfills can't keep up, people and companies made illegal landfills and open-air dumps. Before you know it, 200 Chinese cities are surrounded by garbage, causing safety hazards to residents. This is a situation other major land-scarce countries have faced before. Megacities like Tokyo, Seoul, and Singapore have turned to incinerators as a technological solution. Thusly, so did China. Mainland China's first modern incinerator was built in Shenzhen in 1985. This incinerator had capacity of about 500 tons per day and was provided by the Japanese company Mitsubishi Heavy Industries. Mitsubishi Heavy, in turn, licensed their technology from the German company Martin in around the 1970s when Japan adopted incinerators. The two companies often worked together, combining Japanese manufacturing with German engineering. But in the 2000s, incineration and waste-to-energy plants were not widely adopted in China. In 2002, just 3.7% of China's collected waste was incinerated. 7% was composted, leaving all the rest, well over 85%, to be landfilled. There were attenuating factors, too. Chinese urban households generate a fair amount of organic trash, as I mentioned. Organics are 60 to 80% water, which causes problems for incineration as water absorbs thermal energy, dampening its heating value. There were also economic issues. A waste-to-energy plant has far higher capital costs at about $66,000 to $120,000 per ton of daily capacity, with some going as high as $365,000. Though that high number is more of a developed country estimate. These figures come out of the World Bank's Decision Makers Guides for Solid Waste Management Technologies 2018. A landfill, by comparison, costs about $5,000 to $20,000 per daily ton of capacity over its lifetime. So all in all, it's about 5 to 10 times cheaper to make a landfill, even less if that landfill is an illegal one. A fierce debate raged early on, with many saying that not addressing the core issue of waste generation is only treating the symptoms. Without proper recycling, collection, or fees to incentivize reduction, incineration just transfers the trash to the air. There are also health issues, which I will discuss later. But the need to just be rid of the waste got too real. Famously, there was an independent 2011 documentary called Beijing Besieged by Waste, made by director Wang Zhouliang. Wang got on a motorbike and traveled around Beijing, mapping over 450 such illegal landfills and dumps on Google Maps. It also called out the difficult lives of trash pickers sifting through this toxic trash looking for stuff to sell, and showed terrifying footage of animals and livestock eating plastic bags. It was pretty horrid. The hard data and undeniable footage sparked a groundswell of public sentiment to which the mainland Chinese authorities had to respond. The 12th five-year plan, which covers the years between 2011 and 2015, noted that the country had urbanized very quickly, but its waste processing capacity could not keep up. Thus, in April 2012, a new tariff policy went into effect that made waste-to-energy plants something that people wanted to invest in. The policy deemed every ton of solid waste to provide about 280 kilowatt-hours of power. The Chinese government pledged to pay waste-to-energy plants about 0.65 RMB for each of those 280 kilowatt-hours. This subsidy is funded by the local grid company, with partial support from a national power surcharge. Modern plants can generate more, but everything above that 280 kilowatt hours per ton number is paid at the local coal-fired benchmark rate, which depending on the locale is far lower at about 0.25 to 0.45 RMB per kilowatt hour. So, a plant owner-operator stands to earn about 182 RMB per ton just in subsidies, a number, quote-unquote, locked in by policy. More if they generate extra electricity, but that's basically negligible. Now they can augment that power generation money with additional revenue sources. The second biggest revenue source is the waste disposal service fee paid by the city. That is generally like 60 to 160 RMB per ton, but it gets put to bid, so it can be lower. Beyond that, the plant can earn money from selling heat to heat homes, disposing of industrial sludge and waste, selling power direct to AI data centers, or selling leftover metal slag. Not a lot, but it's honest work. So, taking all that in, the average waste-to-energy plant generates 250 to maybe 350 RMB per ton of waste. Cost with depreciation has been estimated by industry groups to be about 200 RMB per ton, leaving gross margins at about 25 to 75%. Highly dependent on the plant itself. Companies also have a VAT refund they can get for a few years. That is a below-the-line benefit that helps raise after-tax cash flow. Plants are largely made via the build, operate, transfer model. The company signs a long-term concession with the local government for a waste-to-energy plant. The company then raises the money, usually by selling bonds, and builds the plant. Once done, the owner runs the plant throughout the concession period, hopefully earning a healthy profit back on their capital. After the concession ends, usually about 20 to 30 years, the company transfers the asset to the government. At about 182 RMB out of 250 to 350 total, the government subsidy provides over half of total revenue. Without it, the business is not attractive, nigh unsustainable considering how much operating leverage is involved. But with the subsidies, we have a profitable industry, and companies emerge to build and run incinerators via the BOT model, the largest being China Everbright, Chongqing Sanfeng, Shanghai Environment Protection Group, and Zhennan Jinjiang Environment. There are over 20 publicly listed companies in this space. Now here, I need to mention that incinerators receive criticism for being linked to health side effects. I have to note here that there are so many unresolved questions, with the answers to many of them being, we don't know. One major issue concerns particles released in the air. Health-wise, short and long-term exposure to such particles can lead to chronic conditions like bronchitis, plus respiratory and cardiovascular diseases like lung cancer. Environmentally, particles in the air contribute to haze and smog. They also injure plants and animals in the region. Particle counts, though, can be reduced. Many years ago, incinerator facilities added afterburner zones to achieve the most complete possible combustion. They have also implemented filters to capture particles above a certain size. Even so, concerns remain about the impact of these nanoparticles that remain in the air. Such particles can easily slip past the upper airways of the nose and throat to directly enter the lungs. But do they actually cause health problems? This, again, we're not sure. Another issue of concern is the flue gas. It depends on the waste composition, but flue gas can contain hydrochloric acid, sulfur dioxide, sulfur trioxide, and nitric oxide. There are also heavy metals like copper and the like. But what incinerators are most infamous for are these supertoxins, dioxins and furans. This is a family of chlorinated hydrocarbons produced when we burn items with chlorine, like plastics. We know of about 75 dioxins and 135 furans. They are resistant to light and environmental breakdown, so they accumulate in livestock and foods, causing in people reproductive problems, weak immune systems, and potentially cancers. The only method to remove the dioxins and furans completely is to not burn any chlorinated plastics, which isn't practical. The modern philosophy is to use multiple approaches, including high heat, which is why modern incinerators require that the waste spends at least 2 seconds in temperatures of over 1000 degrees Celsius, plus catalysts and filters to reduce the dioxin level beyond a legislated amount. Is this okay? The evidence is controversial, with claims of fraud. Monitoring equipment is said to be unreliable. The fly ash is still full of dioxins. Moreover, there are still the other byproducts to consider like mercury, sulfur dioxide, and hydrochloric acid. There are people who take the position that an incinerator cannot be redeemed in any circumstance. Period. One of the major issues of building these plants has been local sentiment, something we might call NIMBYism. I mentioned earlier how Seoul banned directly depositing waste into landfills, particularly in the Gyeonggi and Incheon regions outside Seoul proper. The curious thing about this ban is that Seoul is short on incinerator capacity because nobody wants them nearby. A 2022 plan to add a new incinerator in the area of Mapo got tied up in court. In March 2026, Seoul declined to appeal to the Supreme Court and formally canceled the project, losing 1,000 tons per day of capacity. Another proposed project in Gangnam, where an incinerator already exists, is called a quote-unquote modernization, but Gangnam residents say it is a shadow expansion. Right now, this one is at an impasse. These social concerns have many reasons. There are the health and environmental risks that we discussed earlier, but people also feel concerned about operational risks and the potentially massive damage that accidents can cause. Such accident risk is not theoretical. In December 2013, there was an explosion at the Shanghai Jianchao Municipal Solid Waste Incineration Plant, one of China's largest at the time, caused by methane buildup inside the plant. 3 were reported to have died. The most notable NIMBY incident occurred in the city of Hangzhou, in the Zhejiang province, the Hangzhou Zhoufeng plant. At the end of 2014, Hangzhou had a population of 8.9 million people and a 75% urbanization rate. Throughout 2014, those people each day produced about 9,055 tons of municipal solid waste, growing at a rate of 10% a year. To handle all that, Hangzhou had 4 existing waste-to-energy plants capable of handling about 4,600 tons per day, and 1 landfill designed for 1,920 to 4,000 tons per day. Unfortunately, one of the waste-to-energy plants had an aging design, was too small with capacity of just 400 tons per day, and faced substantial local opposition, and the landfill was scheduled to fill up in the next 5 years. So, in April 2014, the local Hangzhou government announced a new, larger plant in the Yuhang district with capacity of 3,000 tons per day, over a third of the city's trash production. It was, if I may say, a dumpster fire. Hangzhou is a beautiful city with a long history. The e-commerce giant Alibaba Group is headquartered there, along with DeepSeek and Unitree. Local residents also grow Longjing tea in this area, making the environmental impact doubly important. This is their livelihood. My main point is that this is a rich population that cares about where they live, and a waste-to-energy plant some 20 miles southwest of the core downtown area, even if it is somewhat tucked away in a valley, makes people nervous. 20,000 residents signed a petition to protest the plant. The local government held a brief media session promising to work with the people, but when some geological equipment was delivered to the site for a survey, social media rumors exploded and daily protests started. It came to a head in May 2014, when tens of thousands of people clashed with police, causing extensive property damage. Protesters blocked a major highway in Yuhang and engaged in hand-to-hand combat with police. State media reported that 39 people were hurt and no deaths, which does not seem very believable to me. When things calmed down, the local Hangzhou government pledged that the plant be suspended and go through a legal decision-making process. What went wrong here? A small group inside the local government cited the plant. They chose it on sensible technocratic grounds, tucked inside a former stone quarry and accessible without going on residential roads, but it was done without transparency. Then they announced it and tried to rush it through without proper public involvement. Since the public wasn't consulted, they got angry and lashed out, forcing the government to rally resources to defend its choice. This tragedy in 3 acts is called by academics decide, announce, defend. It is also sometimes jokingly called decide, announce, defend, abandon, for obvious reasons. It is not possible to eliminate NIMBY feelings, even for the Communist Party. But what you can do is channel those feelings earlier into the design and planning process, where they are less likely to interfere at a late stage, and you can educate and engage with the public to gain general acceptance. After the 2014 mass incident in Hangzhou, the local government did not abandon the plant. They concluded that the lack of transparency in decision-making and the government's inconsistent statements diminished the public trust, so they rebooted it. The old operator was a state-owned startup firm, and their lack of experience was a core source of distrust. They were replaced with Everbright, a larger, more experienced company. The Hangzhou local government then underwent a thorough environmental impact analysis with participation from the public and an institute from the central government. Documents in the process were made available online. Local residents were brought into the process. Government staff was mobilized to visit and interview over 25,000 people, collecting 500 suggestions and concerns. A special disposal fee was attached to fund these environmental initiatives, and local residents were hired as supervisors. The Yuhan district also promised $360 million of financial support for tourism and infrastructure. Whether this was ever delivered, I'm not too sure. The government and company also arranged local hearings where Everbright experts answered questions. In the second half of 2014, 5,000 local residents were bused to other Everbright facilities and shown how it worked, including the presence of automatic monitoring equipment. A year later, in April 2015, construction restarted. The plant entered operations in late November 2017. This success largely created the playbook for handling NIMBY sentiments, a clear focus on community engagement, careful site selection, automatic monitoring, long standard EIA procedures, and more. It doesn't remove all the sentiments. Blockades and NIMBY feelings continue to exist, particularly in areas that already have a few incinerators, but construction can move on. So the 2012 tariff created an attractive business model. The government learned important lessons on community engagement after 2014. Next comes the boom. The Chinese central government had set a goal of about 591,000 daily tons of capacity by 2020 and worked backwards from there. In December 2017, the government ordered its provincial governments to finish preparing their site selections by 2018. Since a plant takes about 15 to 24 months to build, a 2018 site selection deadline gives enough time to finish their plants by 2020. This created a concrete pipeline that you can rush to hit the deadline. Between 2013 to 2017, China added just 41 new waste-to-energy plants each year. End of 2017, there was a total of 360 across the nation. But in mid-2019, state media reported that there were at least 400 projects then in progress across the nation. The boom was already underway. By 2020, China had 462 operational waste-to-energy plants. National incineration capacity reached 580,000 tons per day, essentially hitting the target. But looking by region, progress was uneven. East China hit their marks, while West and Central China did not. So the central government raised the target to 800,000 tons per day, with a focus on the rural areas. They also changed the subsidy structure. Any plant started after January 2021 will no longer get the 0.65 RMB per kilowatt-hour subsidy. Moreover, the subsidy will sunset after 82,500 hours for all plants. The VAT refund was also partially lowered. The intention was to force the waste-to-energy plants not to rely on power generation revenue, which is not economical compared to solar and wind, and turn to generating secondary revenues like city waste disposal fees. It also tried to make them more efficient. All projects were declared to be finished by 2023. Thus, by the end of 2024, we have a total of 1,137 waste-to-energy plants across the nation, and what has been commonly discussed in media as a quote-unquote regional imbalance. There is a lot of imbalance. 60% of total incineration capacity is in 5 provinces: Zhejiang, Jiangsu, Guangdong, Shandong, and Fujian. Between 2023 and 2025, the E20 Research Institute reported that the average capacity utilization rate of domestic waste-to-energy incineration projects was about 60%. Some plants have utilization rates of 80+%, others as low as 24%. About 16% of projects have a capacity utilization rate below 50%. And it is rough for them because fixed costs are very high. If these are not being used, they are losing money. A lot of money. Ergo why they're going back and digging up older landfills. Growth will be slower post-2022. These businesses must find new lines to replace their subsidy revenue. In addition to just charging the cities more, meaning citizens pay more expensive trash collection fees, there's also expanding into rural areas, building plants abroad in places like Indonesia, and developing new business lines like smelting. As I said earlier, there are plenty of voices that see this as an absolute win. In an FT article covering this, a representative said at the end, quote, "Having less waste is actually a good thing. It means the environment is improving," end quote. I do not know what to make of that. It's nice to not have trash lying around for sure, but sending it all into the air doesn't sound very sustainable either. But there is one thing to consider: how the Chinese government managed to expertly spur private industrial development and build these extremely unpopular items in a genuinely short time that is legitimately impressive. There is something to be learned from it. Alright everyone, that's it for tonight. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to the channel, sign up for the Patreon, and I'll see you guys next time.